All right, guys, we are live. I'm super excited to be speaking with y'all. Today, we're going to be going over the Hermetica and what are these ancient arts and sciences and how are they being utilized today in the world. And the first thing I wanted to ask whoever wants to answer is what is this dude Hermes all about?
Hey, is this mic work? Okay. Well, he's ancient philosopher, priest, alchemist. You know, it's first discovered, or I guess dates back to around 300 BC. It's still speculative because there's a lot of mystery surrounding him, whether it's a contemporary of Moses or if he fathered multiple children that carried on his name and his philosophy. But as far as his earliest writings would be the Emerald Tablet, which is where we get the as above, below kind of philosophy. That kind of
one of the reasons I posted the thing I did today, the link that I did on that Wikipedia entry of, it wasn't Wikipedia, it was some woo-woo site, and it was Hermetism versus Hermeticism. And the reason for that is because Hermeticism started in the Renaissance period. And it was based around the Hermes mythology, that he was a real man that existed and all this thing. The Greeks knew that he wasn't a real man, that it was a symbology of several men, if anything, and that several philosophies, and it was, he wasn't even like a Comte de Germain. He was never ever really known to exist. It's that's the way I've got it. Now you can read the Kabbalion, and the Kabbalion was written around 1904, 1907, and it states that he was a real guy and everything. But most scholars that I followed in the 19th century, I mean the 20th century, in the 1900s, like Andy P. Hall and other people, even Joseph Campbell, no one ever attributed him to being actually a person that lived. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not being argumentative with Dylan. I'm just throwing that out there because I've been on both sides of that story and I don't really know what the facts are.
That's kind of how that's the general consensus all around the board, is no one really knows if he's a real guy or if it's just a kind of a character like Christian Rosenkreuz or something like that, where it's just an ideal. I think people have said the Corpus Hermeticum is actually a compilation of different philosophers that use him as the teacher, kind of, I guess, the form of the teacher, and they utilize his name as, you know, their teachings that they're teaching their students. It's written out like a conversation.
Yeah,
but
the point man is like that.
That comes like a good 600 years later from the Emerald Tablet. So, you know, even if it was a real guy, it couldn't possibly be the same dude unless he was, you know, like super.
If you look at the Gospels in the Bible, and you just look at most Bibles today have the date that the Gospel was written, it'll be like 85 or 180 something. The Gospels are taken today by, I mean, I don't know, I can't say all scholars, of course. There's a guy named Bart Ehrman that it's kind of, I guess, maybe probably, he did a lot of research on it. And for the most part, I can't find any resource that states otherwise, that all of the Gospels were written as pseudepigrapha, which is what biblical scholars would call they call it, but it's a forgery. It's me saying something, writing it, saying this is Peter writing it. And they do that for two reasons. One, it fits the school of that prophet, or it falls in line with their beliefs. And also could lend it credibility. But that's kind of like what I've gotten out of it. And maybe that's too cynical of a view, but that's what I've got.
I was interested in
what's the message, guys? What is the message of Hermeticism?
I think it's about transmutation of the spirit. It's about realizing that God is more than just an entity, as opposed to a Christian view of it, where it was kind of heretical. at the time is more about the spiritual alchemy, transmutation of the soul. You can find a lot of the overlaps in alchemy and Hermetism.
Manly P. Hall has a speech, and probably out of that, he probably has, it comes from a book that he was probably reading live, was a comparison of Hermeticism or Hermetism, I don't know which term he uses, Gnosticism, and Neoplatonism. And he compares those three because if you've had my experience, you found that there's very little difference between the three philosophies at the, you know, at the basis of what they say. But I think he delineates one as like law, one is like religion, one is like science. And, you know, to me, it is just another form of, I don't know, a form of that. It's not really Gnosticism. I mean, it's not really an external belief. It's not part of the Orthodox religion. It's just something that was competing with it, that Hall claims without these three things competing with Christianity, Christianity would have gotten dissolved and it would have just disappeared. But because they fought against these things, they had this fervor, I guess, to stay alive. And conversely, we only know about these things because of what the Christians wrote about it. A lot of it. There's a lot of some of the documents that do exist there.
They were also sorry, go ahead.
Well, everything you just named, though, aren't those all in use by Christianity? In fact, let's just talk about Hermeticism proper. Like Pico de Mirandola and Ficino, that's where Hermeticism came out of. I mean, well, yeah, it came from the 2nd, 3rd century, and the myth is that it came from earlier than that. But Mirandola and Ficino and the Medicis, they were all using Hermeticism, and they were studying it because Hermeticism fit their ideas that, I mean, so that was my opinion about Hermeticism, is that
there's paganism,
it's
man.
perennial philosophy. That's the idea, is that there's this one truth, and all the other gods and angels and Moses and Zoroaster, their message essentially to me was that Hermes was this precursor that gave them the message. And so Mirandola develops his Christian Kabbalah out of this Hermeticism. The Medicis pay, I just said his name, I can't think of it now, the translator. Anyway, Italian Renaissance, humanism, Hermeticism comes out of that as a means for the Christians to say, well, this is why there's other ancient gods, and this is how they were saved way back when. Does that make sense, guys?
I read about that in the book called Sistine Secrets about Michelangelo, and it was more about in the 1980s how they decided to clean the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, not restore it, but just clean all the soot off of it. And they got these two guys up there that were scholars, and on the scaffolding and such, within just a few inches of what was painted, and there's not one Christian symbol on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. It's all what they called pagan or Jewish. And so even Pope Julian is a damned symbol, you know, and so they have a lot of that type of symbology in that. And he was raised by the Medicis. And in that book, it talks about Cosimo de' Medici and another one actually saving the writings of Plato and the writings of Hermes from I think Constantinople, but I'm not sure. And when the Turks took over or something, I don't know. I think that's even in the same timeline, but I think that's what the book said. But the Medicis were in Florence, and you had all your really hardcore non-pagan Christians up in Rome, I think. And so that was around the same time they had two popes, I think, in two different places at the same time. So.
Also, I think they were also into thinking about the universe and how it functions. You know, pre-Plato kind of thing. They're thinking about energies and flowing, and like the 7 Hermetic principles of you know, polarities, dualism, they're talking about the soul, the mind, the body, and how, how it all kind of overlaps. I think so. They were, the Gnostics, they just thought, hey, if you pray and you just know, you feel the power of the universe, it's within you. You don't have to go to church. So I think that's why it's a little bit different than Christianity. I think that's why they got ostracized.
But the earliest Gnostics were Christians.
I think they had,
Yeah.
yes, I think they had different ideals that the church was trying to instill. So yes, they were writing their writings and passing on their knowledge. I think a lot of that Hermeticism is a lot of it was hidden in through like forms of alchemy and stuff. It's kind of like hiding in plain sight, but just through words and passing it down, and someone teaching it to someone else that they could communicate the secret code that they were trying to communicate with each other. And I think a lot of those writings got pulled out of the Bible. They didn't bother to put that in the Bible. That's why you have like books like the Nag Hammadi, writings of St. Thomas, all these other dudes, because they just didn't agree with the church. They had just a different viewpoint. They still both believed in God. They just had two different ways they were going about it. That's what I got. That's what I got.
It got really bad in about the 400 to 800s whenever Constantine took over, and around the 800 BC or 800 AD. And in that period, he sold over all the royalty and everything to the Roman Catholic Church and gave it all up within the
That was Charlemagne in the 800s.
Well, he did. I think Constantine wrote what was called the donation, and the donation took into effect about 800 to 1,000 years later, after Constantine died, to where he gave over the rights and powers of the original royal lineages who protected the pagan worship and the Gnostics and the Hermeticists as well throughout the years. So whenever that happened, that's what really shot off the Roman Catholic Church, because people who weren't supposed to have that knowledge were now in control of everything and suppressing it. And then we saw the constant barrage of sacrifices and burnings of witches and people getting impaled at the stake and all that stuff. It was because of this kind of knowledge, the Hermeticist Gnostic current that was trying to be stomped out.
I think later the term hermetic also is just associated with anything that's esoteric or the occult, Kabbalistic practices, ritual. Some of it's more like secret, esoteric, it's passing on the lineage of that spiritual alchemy, which doesn't exist outside of, secret orders now. I mean, I guess you could go to the bookstore and buy it, but as far as a lineage, seems like you have to be initiated to be an initiate.
Well,
but you're jumping horses here, man, because you're talking about Hermeticism and Gnosticism and all that, and then you're talking about like the Salem witch trials and such. And the problem with that is that the Hermetism and Hermeticism and Gnosticism and all that has either Christian, Jewish, or Greek type of roots to it. And then you come over here, there was not that kind of shit a whole lot accepted. Now, and the witches that were burned over here were not, I don't think they were Gnostics. I don't think they were Hermetics. I don't think they were Christian or any type of allusion to it. I think it was pagan witchcraft. And I think that what we call it is medicine or, whatever you want to call it, herbalism or whatever. And then there was also magic, and there's probably forces and stuff that they dealt with that we probably still don't understand because it was squashed out. But the culture, the cause and effect isn't there to go from the early days of the Christian church to go there, because there was no other influence in the Americas except some sort of Christian influence. All Pennsylvania and all those different colonies were originally set up because they were being persecuted in their own country, and they all were some sort of Christian. I'm not saying that everybody was Christian. I don't believe that the founding fathers were Christian. I believe they were deists. But I'm saying that what was accepted and what was able to be done publicly was Christian, because because of the oppression of the Christian church on the people to not do anything else or get their ass killed. But you know,
And what you were saying, Dylan, about the energy, like you not being able to receive the secrets unless you're initiated or something of that nature. It's like it's not that you have to be special or around certain people per se. It's more about it's like a hermetic vessel that you're sealed in, and the energy can only be passed not by word or not by writing. There's no way to receive any secrets just by a book or anything. It takes practice. It takes you practicing on yourself and breaking that vessel and then rebuilding the hermetic vessel. And it's sealed. Because I get people all the time asking me, like, why do you study this stuff? Like, why is this so important? Well, it's because once you understand it, you only need one thing, and that's just to get a better grasp on it. Because the way you communicate changes. It's not, I can't give you the secrets. Nobody can give you any secrets. That doesn't exist. You have the secrets already within you.
Yeah, I think, when I talk about being initiated or someone passing down, it's like having, like back in, the Buddhists, they would have masters, Taoist masters that would have students, and they would teach them their ways. And sometimes I think it takes other people that help you open your eyes to stuff that you might have not seen before, kind of help you peel back the layers of an onion, I guess, in a way. And I think go ahead.
I think there may be something to be said for a transmission of something to be given to people. If they're, one, they have to be ready for it, and two, the person giving it has to be able to give it, or has to be able to work as a, they have to be the conductor for it. There's another current that works through them, and not necessarily either of those two things have to happen at the same time either. So somebody who's not a qualified initiator can potentially impart something to somebody that's ready for it, just because that person is ready for it. And it works the other way, and it works all kinds of different ways. But I think what Dylan was saying about something, I didn't hear exactly what you heard, Cal, but I think there's something to be said for somebody can impart a gift to you. In the Gospels, Jesus says, my peace I give to you, my peace I leave with you. And so in a way, that right there is kind of an initiation. And if he's someone to be emulated, that's kind of a profound statement in itself. Like that's a transmission given to all of us. So anyway.
I can't remember the exact term, but they say in the Kabbalion, when a student is ready, a teacher will appear. It's kind of along those same lines. It's like when you have ears to hear and eyes to see, the things will be revealed to you. It's
lips of wisdom are shut except to the ears of understanding.
There you go.
What it said, I think, something like that.
That sounds a little bit more poetic than what I was trying to say.
That's why we can't hear anything. I found it interesting being my age, going back and reading a book that I read 10 years ago, and then reading it again, and finding how many different things I find from it.
Well, you said earlier that you were going to talk about the 7 principles in the Kabbalion. So what are those 7 principles? Because I need a refresher. I hadn't read that thing in over 10 years.
I took a couple notes earlier. I think the first one is mentalism. So just the idea that a thought is a thing. So when you think something in your mind that you actually are, it's before you take action. You're creating something in your mind before you even do it physically. So I think it was all thoughts become reality.
The delineates between the all with a little a and the all with a big A, or maybe all caps. I don't know, but that's being the all with big A or all caps would be the same concept that we might attribute to a godhead or a deity, or at least a force that we would pull from within, pull from. And I forgot what I was going to say. Never mind. I must not maybe need to say it. The all is mental, is what it says. It says the universe is mental, the all is mental.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to talk about how does the all create. Now, the all is like us, and we're an individual, and we think, and we create with our hands. We create with taking things and making stuff by combining it together, or destroying it, pulling it apart, or adding to it, or taking it away. And the idea is it's the all. It can't be taken away from. It can't be duplicated. It can't be split, and it can't be added to, because there's nothing to add to it. It's the all. And so how would it create? How else do we have to create that's not doing those physical things? And it's in our head. It's with the thought. And so then it generates the idea that that we in the universe is a thought of the all. And that's another principle in that section of the book that I remember. I'll just say that. I printed it out from Wikipedia just to have notes, but I don't remember everything else. But I also believe what you're talking about in the quantum physics of it, of creating whatever you think about. And I agree with you.
That kind of leads to the correspondence, which is as above, so below. It should be like, I think it's one of the seven.
It's the next one, actually.
Okay.
It's the next one. Yeah.
And so that kind of, for me, it ties in when you look at sacred geometry, the spiral of the Milky Way, and how you see the spiral of the sunflower, how even the macrocosm is reflected in the microcosm, Fibonacci sequence and all that. But also, I think some alchemy books are related to, even as the water goes up and comes down in the heavens, it's also kind of represented in the ambolic when they're distilling it grows from the subtle, when they're taking the plant matter, the soul out of the plant, and it comes back down and it's purified. It's like going back up to heaven and coming back down. And it's also a philosophic term for the transmutation of the soul. And then there is vibration.
On that principle, I just want to say one thing, like as above, so below. If I was going to distill that down into just kind of a simpler way to look at it, it's that we're a reflection of the divine. So the macrocosmic, we're part and parcel as the microcosm. And so the universe or God, whatever the ultimate absolute is, we're a reflection of it. And so that kind of goes back to the first one with the all.
Sorry, guys. I thought I had myself on mute. I'm sorry.
Had word salad happening over here.
Yes, we are the microcosm within the macrocosm. So,
but yeah, I think that's kind of key, and especially with this picture. I'm always using this as my background. It's crap. I can't get the reflection right. It goes left and right. Here is the creative world, the formative world, and here is a light world that comes out of that formative world. And of course, we're somewhere down here. Maybe this is a better way to show it. There's the heavens and all that stuff that we're in, and we're mixed in between the light and the dark over here. But the as above, so below, you can see that symbolism played out in all kinds of different ways, up and down, universe and cell, God and man, Freemasonry's lodge and the individual brother within the lodge, all those sorts of kind of reflections where you can see the symbolism played out in both. And I was having a hard time kind of following along with what you were saying about you said something about the rain rising or something, but I think that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it was kind of just like seeing patterns in the universe represented in a smaller scale. It was just an alchemical reference of them distilling and making like a spagyric or something like that, or like a magical plant substance that they would recognize the heavens within their embolic, the little distilling mechanism. They would just see the correlation of how the earth functioned, how the water evaporated, how it came back down from the sky. And these are very early concepts, which we understand now through science. But to them, it was very magical, having their minds opened up to this kind of epiphany. They're like, oh, wow, I see how the universe works now. Like, we got 4 elements, we have spirit, the pneuma, and the all-pervading God within everything. These guys are really opening themselves up to some cool stuff, and I think that's what's led us here today, talking about all this stuff.
At least with Burma, and I think there's elements of Hermeticism in Burma. The idea that there's a hidden signature, a Paracelsian signature for everything. When you start looking at those things and how you can use those Paracelsian signatures as means to heal people, the further and further and further you dig down into it, there's really just one universal signature. It's the signature of all things. It is the absolute. So that universal solve, that really Hermetic principle, goes back to that as above principle. So we've talked about 2 of those principles. We're fixing to hit number 3, but I've always said that the Kabbalion was not Hermetic. I don't know if Lee agrees with me on that or not, but those first 2 principles, hearing them again for 10 years later, I'm kind of listening to it, and I can see some Hermeticism involved in those 2 first principles at least. So at least so far, the Kabbalion is Hermetic. Is that a good assessment?
It claims to be based on the Emerald Tablets, so it's considerably Hermetic, and it's existentially Hermetic is what I'm trying to say. That's why it was written, is because it's an explanation of the 7 Hermetic principles. In fact, the whole first part of the book is nothing but the Hermetic principles explained. So I think, that's the way I've got it anyway. That's why I printed this off of.
Right, that too.
Well, I think it's helpful for getting it out into a new age. I think it's having a rebirth right now with how fast the Kabbalion is spreading and massively to people who are more simple. They like things more simple. Maybe they just want to read 7 things and just have a gist of it and then go down for
we are saying Kabbalion and not Kabbalah, right?
Kabbalah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Emerald Tablets, right?
It's two different books.
Well, I was under the impression that those were the same, that the Emerald Tablets were translated into the Kabbalion, but I could be mistaken.
The Emerald Tablet is actually just like 1 page, but there's multiple different interpretations of it.
It attributes itself to that trip. It attributes itself to being that, and it also has, it also claims to be a part of a lineage of Hermes too, which we know is kind of erroneous. But yeah, just I agree with you. I've always thought it was, at the very least, an explanation of the 7 Hermetic principles. I thought that's what the whole book was about. So that's interesting.
That's what kind of confused me too, because I'm like, where are they getting? If it's written in 1907, and where are they getting these Hermetic principles, or are the Hermetic principles just passed down through word of mouth over time?
Darcy Kuntz said that the 3 initiates did not exist, and the 3 initiates were really Swami Atkinson. They came up on Wikipedia too. But Swami Atkinson, and he said that it was all his philosophies that were kind of like overlaying it. Whether or not you agree with that or not, I've heard it was Paul Foster Case before, but I think Clint and I've discussed that, and I think we might agree that that's not the case with him. But then somebody said Manly P. Hall, and there's no way, because Manly P. Hall would have been like 4 or something like that when it was written. So Darcy's
maybe
probably the
that's
most learned person that I know about all in kind of research stuff.
yeah. There's also speculation on who the three initiates were, who wrote the book. Were they actually three people?
That's what I said. Darcy says it weren't. Darcy swears that just, he doesn't even talk about it. He just declares that it was Swami Atkins wrote the whole thing.
Well,
So,
regardless whether or not it's true Hermeticism, I think it lends itself to being along those same lines. I think a lot of the stuff they say in there is actually some pretty cool, deep stuff. Either way, I like the other principle about polarities, and they talk about how like temperature and is basically the same thing. There is no hot and cold. There's duality, but it's the same thing. It's just on a different scale measurement.
opposites are the same in nature. Opposites are the same in nature, only differing in degree.
Yeah, different degree.
Yeah, the
So,
two
like-
things that we think are different are really the same. Like that's everything that's like two polar extremes, and like I mean, that's all. Isn't that like in? Does it say that that's in everything? Like things have an existence and then a non-existence, and then everything is dual. Can you say that?
Yeah, like there's dual sides to everything.
Right.
They also say like another virtue they said is that they talk about femininity, masculinity. Like there's two poles on to every side, negative, positive. That even as humans, we have a physical masculine side and a feminine side, left brain, right brain, right arm, left arm, emotions. They go from varying degrees.
So yeah, everything's like a wave and a trough, and everything would have like a masculine and feminine aspect to it, and a compromising, to the paradox, like a resolution to the both poles, like there's a middle ground. Like I think that's like, even though there's a paradoxical nature to reality, like there has to be some kind of resolution, which we find in the actualization of everything.
That's a big part of what they talk about is it's just finding that middle ground and not being swayed from left and right, not being just subject to your human emotions. And when they talk about using your third eye, that is kind of like finding your middle ground. You're not just using both your eyes, just to see around. You're using your mind to see things on a different spiritual level. You're opening up that middle ground between the polarity.
Yeah. Before I even knew about Hermetics, right. Yeah, like I mean, there's chaos and order, there's hot and cold, there's light and dark, and creation and destruction. All these things that are opposites are supposed to be the same in nature. Like it's the nature of it's the exact same. Even though chaos and order, creation, destruction, light and dark, like how can these two things be the same? But like it's our perspective on it that makes it seem. I guess I'm sorry, I'm not very eloquent tonight, but yeah, I noticed that before I even
I know one thing is
understood Hermeticism. So I thought that was interesting.
I know one thing is interesting is like in Hermeticism when it comes to the planets and understanding the fates and virtue and vice tie a lot into that. Virtue and vice, dark and light. It's interesting how they also have these alchemical reactions in the body too. So depending on what element you're dissolving, so when your ego is breaking down, just imagine layers of ego and it's breaking down because of this element, it's those polarities being reconciled. And then now that shell is crushing and then you're rebuilding back up. So that's where a lot of the death and rebirth come from. It's all alchemical. And that's what all these symbols really actualize internally inside of you. I had this guy, he posted on one of my posts one time, and he was talking about how he was like, all religion's all bullshit, like none of that matters, it's all fake, yada, yada, yada. Science is everything, magic is not real. And I just thought about it, and I like thought about Paracelsus, and I was like, this guy like invented science. This guy like invented medicine. Like this guy like invented everything. And I posted it, I sent him a link. So you're telling me you love science, and you're just gonna throw this out? The guy who invented your method that you use and you trust for your existence, you're gonna throw it out? And it just blew my mind in that moment. I was just like, oh, this is what the world needs right now. We need to go back to this, like, because this is the essence of what we actually enjoy about life, which is discovery, creation, understanding reality, being able to manipulate energy. However you want to put that, it's understanding your relation to the outside world, self and other combining, left and right merging. When it comes to who you are, who you want to be, how you want to live your life, all of those things coming into synergy. I'm sorry, I'm off my soapbox now. My bad.
Brother, that was good. My bad.
I like this. There's a one chapter in the Corpus Hermeticum where it's, I guess, Hermes talking to Periclesius, and he's asking him, he's like, look at this barrel and this vase and this cup. He's like, what do you see? And he says, they're empty. And he goes, are you sure? He's like, yeah, they're empty. There's nothing in them. He's like, just because it's not tangible doesn't mean that there's nothing in there. There's spirit in there. There's air. He's like, you walk through nothing, and it is still something.
Oh yeah, like nihilism is not a belief in nothing, because I mean it's like a concept, so it's like you can't really
Well, I think it was more about them like thinking
believe in
about
nothing, because that's a belief in something.
Yeah, I think it was
Huh?
more about them realizing the air was an actual thing. Like
Air. Oh, you mean like prana?
the space in front of you. You're
Right.
waving your. It was more of a. I don't know. I think it was more of kind of like an old teacher kind of joke, trying to explain
I
to
understand.
someone.
I
Yeah.
understand, but that made me think about something completely like on another tangent, but still the same.
But
I'm gonna try to stay on track. I'm sorry.
They do go off and start to explore other matters like how how things in like planets and stuff, and how the force, what moves that, and what makes everything else move. Is there a conscious? Does it have a consciousness? Like we have a consciousness. Like we decide to move. Earth is driven by a mysterious force that we can't see. And that's when he was saying, just because it's not there, it just means it's tangible. And that's how he related it to God as well. It's like, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
I understand.
Yeah.
But they're talking about the invisible world then, like the world that exists but we can't see it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like germs, atoms, So I thought, I don't know, when you were talking about the empty space, it made me think about the concept of nothing, and that took me off onto a whole other tangent, because philosophy of language and nothing, you're supposed to have like something that the word refers to in order for it to make sense. But if a word is not referring to anything because you're talking about actually nothing, then you can't ever actually grasp it as a concept. Like you're not even really talking about it. So there is like this kind of like when you're talking about Taoism, I'm sorry, this is not Hermeticism at all, but like Taoism is the way. And like if the way was always something that was elusive, being the only thing that's real, is like the only thing that I can't seem to grasp. Like I can't even talk about this thing. So like, I don't know, does that seem to resolve anything? Because there's a big dualism between nothing and something, or nothing and everything. But that seems to be like a middle ground, like a resolution, emptiness, void.
Well, I think it's a concept that it's really hard to explain through words. So that's why it takes whole books to try to explain concepts that are not tangible, like spirit and God, or angelic realms, psychic realms, astral realms. Somehow we managed to come up with definitions for them with words, and explain them in abstract concepts. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Here, try that on me one more time. I'm sorry. I apologize.
I don't even know if I can repeat that. So as far as we have over centuries used our words to explain abstract concepts that were in the past very hard to explain, such as concepts like nothing, astral realms, angelic realms, the concept of God, and the fact that it's not tangible doesn't necessarily mean it's not there. Just like the air, we can't see it, but we know it's there. It's molecules. Everything has vibrations. Everything is moving. Earth, the cosmos.
If we move on to the to the next Hermetic principle, which is the principle of vibration, I think is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that would be the next.
It says in there that it says that the all with the capital A is said to be at an infinite level of vibration, almost to the point of being at rest. I think they're wrong. I think it is at rest. And the reason I think it is at rest is because of the theories of Nassim Haramein and other things, but it's the idea that the vacuum of space and everything that they say, if this is the nucleus of an atom is this basketball, then the electron circling it is like 120 miles away. And everything in between is empty space. And so they say that there's a vacuum in space with no energy in it, but mathematically they can prove there's like exponentially more energy in that space than there is in all matter that's ever been created. And they can force it all down mathematically into the size of a sugar cube. And all the mass that's ever been created is like one of these big ass fucking mathematical numbers shy of being 1 cubic centimeter of empty space. And so the reason that we think it's an empty space and we think that it's a vacuum and that nothing's going on there is because there really is nothing going on there. We define most things as to what they do. And I believe that energy is sitting there in perfect equilibrium, not doing anything. And so that's why we can't detect it. And to us, it seems unseen. And so I believe that the all is literally sitting at rest, waiting rest to vibrate into it and vibrate back out over to this side of things and fool around. And then if we go to polarity, there's what you're talking about. The other thing is how they all are in the same in nature, but only differing in degree. Like heat being, like you said, the best example of that is that heat is the abundance of heat and cold is the lack of heat, not the abundance of cold. It's the lack of heat. It's the same energy and it's the complete total polarity. It's only differing in degree, not nature. It's the same thing as far as what it is. And then if you go to the principle of rhythm, it expresses the idea that there is a manifested measured motion to and from, flow and inflow, back and forth. To me, it's real similar to the vibration thing. I think that my mind is really not capable of separating the two in my head right now. But then if you get to the next one, it gets to what you were talking about with the one and the all and dual and non-dual is the principle of cause and effect. And I believe that it says it explains that there is a cause for every effect and an effect for every cause. It also states that there is no such thing as chance, that chance is merely a term indicating extant cause that not recognized or perceived. So it's chance is saying that it happened and we don't know why, but there's still a why. And the principle is verified in it. Huh?
The cosmic law.
I reckon they don't use that term here. But, yeah. But I wrote a note here. Let me just say this. I'll let you. A major problem, I think, is the focus of the effects. We always focus on effects. We don't ever really meditate on what's unseen. We always today are focusing on what's seen, and it takes an effort to focus on the unseen. For me, it does. I think for most people, it does. Not most of us people. Most people in the world, they don't ever think about the unseen. Sometimes they don't even admit that it exists. But Manly P. Hall thought, and he talks about the Greeks, and he says that the Greeks were ahead of us because they knew there was an unseen. And they knew that the more they meditated on it, the more they were likely to find the cause, because the unseen is usually the cause of what is seen. And so if you even look at medicine and the way we do mainstream medicine, they never ever treat a cause. They treat the symptoms and the effects of something. They try to prevent it through vaccines and such, but they cannot prevent that cause from existing. And so that's the next one after that's principle of gender. And that one is masculine, feminine, never male and female. And it's that balance, like you said, between the two, the harmony, the beauty, whatever that balances the two, the air filter, whatever, it's man. or woman, you know, the entity of us. And that's all 7 of them. And I'll shut up and let y'all talk now.
You want to watch Rocky Horror Picture Show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about Rocky Horror?
I just keep thinking Dr. Frankenfurter saying, so I'll remove the cause, but not the symptom. Sorry.
I thought you were
Somebody would have.
going with the male gender or
42.
male masculine feminine thing.
Right?
Yeah, I worked it right in there, right?
That too.
Yeah, I think that it says in the Kabbalion that many people have, at that time in the early 1900s, they said that they've taken the principle of gender and twisted it out of its meaning to sexualize it. And they said that it didn't have anything to do with sex. It didn't have anything to do with what's between your legs or who you want to screw. It had to do with masculine forces and feminine forces, like Dylan was talking about. And one of the most confusing things for me when I fooled with Golden Dawn stuff and Kabbalah was it took me, well, first of all, the organization I was in didn't even have a class on Kabbalah for like 3 years. But to the point where I even asked someone, is that, you know, part of our curriculum? They're like, well, yes, it's a skeletal of our structure and all that shit. But I forgot what I was going to say, and I guess resentment took over, and I forgot what I was going to say.
It's something confused
Oh, the
you.
masculine and feminine pillars. Even after becoming a Mason and all that, and getting into the GD stuff, and I was always confused about which pillar was feminine and which one was masculine. And in my mind,
Boaz and John.
yeah, Boaz and
I
Joachim,
think
but
Boaz.
more particularly in the Golden Dawn, because one is specifically called the pillar of severity, and one's called the pillar of mercy. And I always, in my mind, because of like this cowboy upbringing, that I always saw the severe pillar as being the masculine one in my head. I could not understand why it wouldn't be that way, and that the merciful one wouldn't be the feminine pillar, like a mother type of thing. And when I found out it's the opposite, and when I finally learned that, you know, because you're standing inside the tree, it's one way; you're standing outside the tree, it's another way. So, you know, it's kind of like flipping around anyway. And so it was bad enough that I can't keep shit straight, but it's really bad when you can look at it from 2 different directions.
Yeah, it is
So,
confusing.
so when I finally learned this shit, and I was like, why, well, you know, what is this
That
friend of
makes me
mine?
trip up.
I asked Clint, because he and I are Masons together. So I called him and I asked him, I said, what do you know about this shit? And he told me that he heard that it was Kabbalistic, I think is what he said, and that the feminine principle, no, the male principle, the masculine principle, not the male principle, the masculine principle gave forth love freely and just spewed it everywhere. And that the feminine principle took the seed and constricted it into darkness with that severity, with the promise of life out of that darkness. And that's about what I remember from that conversation, Clint. You could remind me of anything else I might have forgot that you said.
That's how I remember it. That's how I remember it too.
So how is severity feminine again?
We think about Chokmah being the kind of, I guess, the closest thing to that light that's just shooting out of nothingness, and Chokmah is kind of a representative of that, and you need something like to contain it, like the sea, Bina, the blackness, the vessel, that's restrictive force, and that's when you get the the lightning strike down. You know, it's restricting that, like I guess you would say like a cloud does water before it releases. So it's kind of like I would say severity in that part doesn't necessarily mean coming down like with a hammer.
On to the gender neutrality thing and balancing both masculine and feminine. You guys have probably seen the picture of the rebus before, and it's interesting for those of us that are Masons. The beginning of the Texas Monitor has a picture of the rebus in it, but it's a masculine. It's an androgyne. So there's a male and a female counterpart to it. The rebus, Rebus, and I think. I couldn't tell if you were saying something, Lee. Your mic's off, I think.
It is. I said they called it it's called the hermaphrodite because it's Hermes and Aphrodite. Hermes Aphrodite is the hermaphrodite. I know it sounds funny because we think of chicks with dicks or whatever, but yeah.
Well, but that particular emblem, I think if you go back and look at it, that's the oldest, one of the oldest alchemical emblems there is, and there's
How do you spell it?
Rebus.
Erebus?
Is that the two-headed figure with the sun and moon? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Rebus.
I think so.
And what? Describe it to me again. I'm not getting it. I don't see it.
It's a good description of this whole gender principle that we're talking about of the masculine forces, and they anthropomorphize it to be a male and female, one unified being.
Right.
And it goes along with all these hermetic principles that we're talking about. What happened here?
Try androgyne. There it is.
I see it.
That's not the particular one I'm talking about. That's, yeah, somewhere right through there.
This thing.
Yeah, I've got a tramp stamp of that right on my lower back.
Sexy.
And that's when the alchemical principles start coming in, the transmutation of the soul. The silver and gold, being male and female, the duality aspects, finding that center balance. It's all
You know what Chase says on his chest? Chase says that on his chest, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got, I think he's got the one that says double-headed eagle right there. But you guys can see there's like a kind of a, not an evolution, because they seem to all have the same symbols contained in it. But there's definitely a lot of different versions that have happened, over multiple centuries. Anyways, it's just a cool symbol to illustrate this. What number are we on right now?
I went through them all real quick. All the way through gender was the last one.
Yeah, we covered.
We're just
all
going around. We're talking about
mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. Rhythm I kind of skimmed over because I'm still at a loss on how that differs from vibration. And then you also have the principle of polarity and the principle of correspondence kind of overlap a little bit,
And gender too, right?
Yeah, and gender kind of overlaps. It all kind of, because it all is dual, it all has that dual aspect attributed to it. So maybe that's what it is.
I never realized.
I'm gonna take a wee, man. I'm just gonna be listening. I'll be listening in, so don't say nothing bad about me.
I think the difference between the concept of rhythm.
I had some questions about that too, and like vibration.
I think that we mean about vibration is that like energy flows through us. There's a vibration that's inherent within the universe. Like there is, I guess, that chi, that life vibration, and that's kind of the driving force behind the rhythm of everything that moves. Like the tides, the ebb and flow of everything.
So when I think of
swinging back and forth.
Right, I see. When I think of vibration, I usually think of like something being channeled from a source medium and then like an endpoint too. So like it's like, what's the medium? I get that there's like a two channels. There's like a source and then a receiver, and then the medium though. Like that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like what sends the vibration to the receiver?
Well, vibration is really easy. How do you feel right now? That's your vibration. You can kind of, and then it kind of goes into law of attraction off of vibration, as well as the mentalism. Those two kind of interplay together. And with rhythm, you can think of it as like a concept we're familiar with is like EIO principles and like the cycles of nature. So rhythm's kind of like cyclical, but it also can be that neutralization in the form of polarity, like where you can't really neutralize polarity, but you might try to just kind of like temper it. Rhythm can be like as good of a day as I have today, it could be as bad of a day as I have tomorrow. So the cycles continue and they swing both ways.
to be like a pattern, right? Like rhythm and pattern.
Perhaps, but yes.
Everything's patterns. Everything's kind of like, it is like
So,
that's
like,
what the brain's triggered to notice. Right?
your mind might be vibrating on one level, your body might be vibrating on another level, your spirit vibrating on a different scale.
Sure.
Like even colors have vibrations, even though they're just solid, a
Right.
color.
Musical notes are my mathematical note is a vibration. Like on a guitar at 440 hertz, that is a vibration. Am I wrong?
No, I
You guys are
understand.
musicians, right? I don't know about this shit.
I understand that everything's vibration. I just don't understand like the component of it. Like that's I was just wondering. It might not be something that's I don't know like worth talking about to you guys, but I thought it was really like there's if everything's vibration, then what's the
You cut out, man. I couldn't hear what you said because it cut out for a second. Say it
Oh.
again, what you just now said.
Sorry, can you guys hear me better?
No, you stalled, man. Like the video stalled on my end is all. I don't know if everybody else saw it or not.
It's been doing that for me too. It has, but it like catches up. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Say what you were talking about vibration again. What were you saying about that?
Yes, I understand how everything's vibration and light vibrates. I understand sound vibrates. Your mind even has a mind, your brain waves, but I don't understand with the medium that carries all this to us because supposedly it's like the four elements. Every like the components of like everything has a kind of dynamic fire flame attribute to it. Everything has like a kind of fluid wave attribute. Everything's kind of spacious and airy, and everything's kind of got like a dense solid component to it. So like the five elements or the four elements are kind of
I think spirit would be the
things that
medium.
make up what we perceive as the vibrations, how these things are vibrating.
I think spirit, in this case, spirit would be the medium, that what they call that spiritual fire. This fire, and conceptually, fire is kind of what moves all the other elements around and animates them. So I think what they're trying, the concept of that vibration is that it's that unknowable force that we can't see. It is that which animates the universe.
Mm-hmm. So there's those four elements plus the fifth one, which is spirit, and then there's also void. So there's six elements. I'm wondering if there's any more.
What was that last one?
Void.
I've never really heard that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to have void and spirit together. I guess that was something I was introduced to somewhere along the line. I forget. I don't come from a formal education like you Freemasons do. But like I was wondering if there'd be any more that you guys would think of. But it's just food. It's just interesting shit, really.
You get into it, yeah. There's metal. There's Chinese that they use wood, metal.
7 would be an even like cooler number, like 7.
I put metal under the earth.
Metal, yeah.
I kind of fit that in with earth because it kind of it takes wood, metal, rock. That's all kind of earth.
True, but in the Asian pantheon, they actually use metal that replaces air. So it's like earth, water, fire, metal. In the Chinese one. So, did you hear that?
I've seen that.
Metal is interesting. So how Taoism links to Hermeticism is metal is actually the Po. That's the animal self, and it's also your lungs. And if you think about that, if you think about metals as in the alchemical metals of the 7 planets or any of those, it's the same concept because it is your lower reactionary self, your unconscious being made to come to fruition. So it's just interesting, those two elements, they really go really good together in both philosophies. And it's also your breath, right? Like breath is, it's the logos, like it's the spirit, the primal fire. Every single breath is literally like you're taking in those primeval forces, those forces that were mind, which was before all. Before everything material, there was a primeval force that existed, and it was all in mind. before even material existence. So it's cool that those two really go good together, because Taoism puts a big emphasis on the primal fire, like taking in the spirit. And that's what initiates the alchemical process, because when it hits water and it breaks all that up, that's what starts the oven, the alchemical oven. And that's how you get air, because then air comes after that fire and water hits, and it slowly rises and it breaks back down. Yeah, it's cool. And every breath in Taoism, they believe that you're transmuting the lower nature self, which is the sexual force, the Jing, into Qi, just by sitting still and meditating. They feel like every place of awareness, you're putting your yin yang, which is intention and emotion, on. You're creating and evolving. Whether that's a concept, an idea, a shape, anything that existed in the immaterial world that you can think of. Elements, plants.
Mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms. It reminded me,
So then,
you were talking about that, it reminded me of the three alchemical meditations or works. It was like work of the head, work of the hands, and work of the heart. And work of the head meant study, intellectualism, knowledge. Work of the hands was like force creating the universe, cooking, farming, whatever we do with our hands, the alchemy, whatever we do in our lab of scientists. The work of the heart is the meditation part.
the great work.
You know, just opening yourself up to that chi, that life energy, and what they call the gnosis of knowing in the heart, allowing that spirit or the listening, silence, allowing that energy to flow through.
Yeah. Like another question that I had was rhythm being something like, is it like almost like a pattern? Like, because you were kind of trying to differentiate rhythm with vibration and what was the other one? But like, yeah, I was trying to, I guess Sarah was explaining it, and I was wondering if she meant like, because she said something about like cycles. So I was thinking that maybe rhythm had something to do with patterns as well, because I mean, fractal reality, we live in a holographic fractal reality. Our brains are triggered, or we are hardwired to notice patterns everywhere. So I would think that something that would be hardwired into us would have something to do with also the nature of reality. You know, how it would be some cyclical patterns, things work in patterns, things work in, you know, and that would make sense too because of Phi and, you know, Fibonacci kind of working together. What do you guys think?
Well, I think with the rhythms, you have the vibration of, you know, just the energies that we were talking about that exist, just, you know, that chi, just the vibration that permeates all. And then you have the rhythms, which would be like, you know, the universe, the moon rises, pulls the tides, it goes on this side of the earth, orbits around, and then the water goes back down. It's a rhythm. We have that in our heart too. We have a rhythm, you know. Life has a rhythm.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, guys. I'm gonna have to jump off tonight, but I appreciate y'all. It was so much fun, and appreciate you guys taking the time. I wanted to read something off. If you guys wanted to read something too, that'd be a cool way to end it. I've got one I just really wanted to read, and I thought it was fitting. From the Corpus Hermetica. Ficino's, is that his name? Ficino's translation? Then when the mind has got freed from the earthly body, it immediately puts on its tunic, a tunic of fire, in which it cannot stay when in the earthy body. If you guys have anyone you want to add to that you guys were thinking about, go ahead. If not, appreciate y'all.
I think it's good one to end on.
Yeah,
All right.
man. Be cool.
All right, love you.
All right, guys. See y'all later, man.
Peace.
All right, man. Love you. Bye.
Peace out.